The rain never stopped that night in the Hürtgen forest. November 1944. American soldiers huddled in their foxholes, fingers numb, uniforms soaked through. In the darkness you could hear them checking their weapons, the metallic click of an M1 Garand bolt, the reassuring weight of a Thompson submachine gun. But some soldiers carried something different, something that looked perfect on paper. The M1 Carbine, light, compact, easy to handle. It was supposed to be the perfect solution for support troops, paratroopers, and officers who needed firepower without the burden of a full-sized rifle. But as the German counterattack began that night, something went terribly wrong. The real danger wasn't what the enemy did, it was what these carbines did to their own men. By the end of this story, you'll understand the dark reason why thousands of American soldiers found themselves holding a weapon that would fail them precisely when their lives depended on it most. What happens when the tool designed to save you becomes the very thing that betrays you. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to 1940. Army commanders faced a dilemma. They had the M1 Garand, a powerful, reliable battle rifle, but it was heavy and cumbersome. Not every soldier needed that kind of firepower. Paratroopers couldn't jump with a full-sized rifle. Radio operators, mortar crews and artillerymen needed something that wouldn't slow them down. The Thompson submachine gun was effective but heavy and expensive. The military needed something in between. A weapon lighter than a rifle but more effective than a pistol. The solution seemed obvious. Create a lightweight carbine that could be mass-produced quickly and issued to support troops. It needed to work in every environment American soldiers would fight in, from the jungles of Guadalcanal to the frozen forests of the Ardennes. Commanders believed this new weapon would give their men the edge they needed, providing adequate firepower without sacrificing mobility. The M1 Carbine was designed to be that perfect compromise between convenience and combat effectiveness. Then the shooting started, and the paper logic died. On paper, the M1 Carbine looked like a masterpiece of engineering. Weighing just 5.2 pounds with a loaded 15-round magazine, it was nearly half the weight of an M1 Garand. Its short 18-inch barrel made it perfect for vehicle crews, paratroopers and officers working in confined spaces. The .30 carbine round, a smaller, lighter cartridge than the Garand's .30-06, offered minimal recoil, allowing soldiers to maintain accuracy during rapid fire. Early tests showed impressive reliability, and the simple gas-operated rotating bolt mechanism promised minimal maintenance. Production was streamlined to meet wartime demands, with over 6 million carbines eventually manufactured by multiple companies. Soldiers initially appreciated its handiness, often carrying it slung over their shoulders like a cowboy. Rifle. The Germans who captured examples were reportedly impressed by its design, incorporating elements into their own post-war firearms. The M1 Carbine seemed to be everything the army wanted: lightweight, reliable and effective, but the advantage came with a bill. Dark reason number 1, the illusion of power. The fundamental betrayal of the M1 Carbine began with its ammunition. The .30 carbine round was essentially a pistol cartridge on steroids, not a true rifle round. It fired a 110-grain bullet at about 1,890 feet per second, compared to the M1 Garand's 150-grain bullet at 2,800 feet per second. This meant significantly less kinetic energy and stopping power. In combat, this translated into soldiers firing multiple rounds into an enemy who kept coming. The mechanism was simple physics: lighter bullet, less powder, less impact. In the dense hedgerows of Normandy or the jungle heat of the Pacific, where engagements often happened at close range, this deficiency wasn't always apparent, but in the open fields of Europe or during winter operations when heavy clothing absorbed the weak impact, soldiers learned the hard way that their carbines might not stop a determined attacker. Imagine a young GI in the winter of 1944, German soldiers charging through the snow. He aims carefully, fires, sees the bullet strike, but the enemy keeps coming. He fires again and again, emptying his 15-round magazine as the German closes the distance. The carbine that was supposed to protect him has instead given him a false sense of security. And that was only the first problem. Dark reason for 2. The cold weather curse. The M1 Carbine had a secret vulnerability that emerged precisely when American soldiers needed it most: extreme cold. In the brutal winter of 1944-45, during the Battle of the Bulge, temperatures dropped well below freezing. The carbine's lightweight design and thin metal components reacted poorly to these conditions. The operating slide, already designed for minimal friction, would sometimes fail to cycle completely in sub-zero temperatures. Soldiers discovered that the lubricants designed for normal European temperatures would thicken or freeze, preventing the carbine from functioning properly. The mechanism was straightforward: cold metal contracts, lubricants thicken, moving parts slow down or stop. In the Ardennes forest, where temperatures fell to 20°, American soldiers found themselves with carbines that wouldn't fire or would fire once and then jam. The human experience was terrifying. Crouching behind a snow-covered tree, hearing German voices approaching, pulling the trigger and hearing only a click. Some soldiers learned to urinate on their carbines to melt the ice. A desperate solution that speaks volumes about their predicament. The consequence was clear. Many soldiers traded their carbines for captured German weapons, or heavier American rifles whenever possible. The weapon designed for all environments had failed in one of the war's most critical moments. Dark reason number 3. The magazine betrayal. The M1 Carbine's 15-round box magazine seemed like an advantage, more capacity than most rifles of the era, but this feature became a liability in combat. The magazine design, with its thin metal walls and feed lips, was easily damaged. Soldiers carrying carbines often found themselves with magazines that would no longer feed properly after being dropped, stepped on, or simply carried for extended periods. The mechanism was simple but deadly. Damaged feed lips would cause the cartridge nose to dip or rise during feeding, resulting in failures to feed or eject. In the chaos of combat, soldiers would slam a fresh magazine into their carbine, pull the trigger, and hear only a click. The problem was particularly prevalent with the later 30-round magazines designed for the M2 version, which were even less reliable due to their length and the stress placed on the feed lips. Imagine a paratrooper dropped behind enemy lines during D-Day. He's landed safely, assembled his carbine, and now faces German fire. He changes magazines, but the new one fails. In those precious seconds of troubleshooting, the enemy has closed the distance. The magazine designed to give him more firepower has instead become his potential death sentence. Many experienced soldiers carried only 15-round magazines and treated them as disposable, replacing them at the first sign of trouble, a luxury not always available in extended combat situations. Dark reason the 4. The sighting deception. The M1 Carbine's sights presented another hidden danger. Designed for a maximum effective range of 300 yards, the carbine's ladder-style rear sight and protective front sight ring seemed adequate for most combat situations. But the reality was different. The carbine's light barrel and the 30 carbine rounds' relatively flat trajectory created a disconnect between where soldiers aimed and where their bullets actually hit at various distances. The mechanism was a combination of factors. The sight radius was shorter than a full-sized rifle, the light barrel was more susceptible to barrel whip during rapid fire, and the cartridge's ballistics didn't match the sight markings. In combat, this meant soldiers often shot high or low of their targets, especially under stress. The human experience was frustrating and deadly. Carefully aiming at an enemy soldier 200 yards away, only to watch the bullet kick up dirt well short of the target. This problem was exacerbated during night combat or in low-light conditions where the small sights were difficult to align. In the hedgerow fighting in Normandy, where engagements often happened at varying distances through narrow gaps, soldiers found themselves missing targets they should have hit easily. The consequence was tactical. Soldiers lost confidence in their weapons, hesitated before firing, or exposed themselves longer while trying to get a proper sight picture. The sights designed to make the carbine effective at distance instead created a false sense of precision. Dark reason. 5. The doctrine mismatch. Perhaps the darkest reason for the M1 Carbine's betrayal was how it was employed in the field. Originally intended for support troops, paratroopers, and officers, the carbine gradually found its way into the hands of frontline infantrymen. As production ramped up and logistics became complex, many regular infantry units received carbines instead of rifles. This created a dangerous mismatch between weapon and mission. The mechanism was bureaucratic rather than mechanical. Supply officers issued what was available rather than what was appropriate. Commanders, focused on overall equipment numbers rather than individual soldier needs, failed to recognize the problem until it was too late. The battlefield reality was soldiers facing German infantry armed with Mauser rifles and submachine guns, while carrying a weapon that couldn't match either in firepower or range. The human experience was one of inadequacy, watching German soldiers take cover at distances beyond the carbine's effective range, or being outgunned in close quarters by enemies with true submachine guns. In the street fighting in Aachen, or the forest battles in the Hurtgen, American infantrymen found themselves at a distinct disadvantage. The consequence was tactical. Units armed primarily with carbines had to adapt their tactics, avoiding long-range engagements they couldn't win, and suffering higher casualties in situations where a more powerful weapon would have made the difference. The doctrine that called for the carbine had failed to account for how it would actually be used in the chaos of war. Dark reason 6. The selective fire trap. As the war progressed, the military introduced the M2 carbine, a selective fire version capable of both semi-automatic and fully automatic fire. This seemed like an upgrade, but it created new problems. The M2's fully automatic rate of fire was approximately 850 rounds per minute, making it difficult to control. The mechanism was simple physics. The carbine was too light to absorb the recoil of rapid fire, and the .30 carbine round, while underpowered compared to a rifle cartridge, still produced significant recoil when fired in bursts. The battlefield reality was soldiers who, under stress, would switch to fully automatic fire only to see their first few rounds go on target and the rest climb uncontrollably toward the sky. The human experience was one of wasted ammunition and false confidence, believing they had a weapon capable of providing suppressive fire, but instead finding themselves with an empty carbine and still facing enemy fire. In the Korean War, where the M2 saw extensive use, this problem became even more apparent in the extreme cold. The consequence was strategic. The military had to develop better training for selective fire weapons, and eventually led to the development of more suitable automatic weapons like the M14 and later the M16. The selective fire capability that was supposed to make the carbine more versatile instead revealed its fundamental limitations. The story comes full circle to that night in the Hürtgen forest. As German soldiers broke through the American lines, support troops armed with M1 carbines found themselves in a fight they never expected. Their carbines, designed for convenience and secondary roles, were now their only protection against determined enemy infantry. In the darkness and confusion, the weaknesses we've explored converged: insufficient stopping power, reliability issues in the cold, magazine failures, sighting problems, and the fundamental mismatch between weapon and mission. Soldiers who had trusted their carbines now faced a terrible choice: stand and fight with a weapon that might fail, or retreat and abandon their positions. Many did both, trading their carbines for heavier weapons when possible, or simply running for their lives when their carbines jammed or failed to stop advancing enemies. The dark reason the M1 Carbine betrayed soldiers at the worst moment wasn't a single flaw, but a series of compromises that, individually, seemed acceptable but collectively created a weapon that couldn't be trusted when lives were on the line. The lasting impact of the M1 Carbine's failures reshaped American military thinking about infantry weapons. The experience taught military planners that there was no substitute for adequate firepower and reliability in a combat rifle. The carbine's limitations directly influenced the development of the M14, which sought to combine the best features of the Garand and the carbine, and later the M16, which addressed many of the carbine's shortcomings with a more effective cartridge and better design. The mythology of the M1 carbine remains complex. Veterans who carried it in the Pacific often speak fondly of its handiness, while those who faced German infantry in Europe remember its shortcomings with bitterness. The dark reason the M1 carbine betrayed soldiers was that it represented a series of compromises that seemed reasonable in planning, but proved dangerous in combat. War punished the assumption that soldiers could be equipped with good enough weapons and still prevail against determined enemies, and the men who trusted those carbines paid the price.